How's it going, everybody? My name is Infamous Isaac, and I'm here with the final video to the mini Spider-Man series I've been doing. Of all the movies that I watched over the past couple weeks, all coming together for this one final video on me deciding which movie franchise between all three of these was my favorite. I'm gonna be going through everything: the music, the characters, the stories, the fights, the action, the sad points, the good points, everything. So, there's nothing to it but to do it. Let's do it. Well, let's get into it. So let's just start, right? I'm gonna be talking about Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So let's start with the beginning. Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was great. I enjoyed every single movie in the trilogy. I enjoyed the first one. I enjoyed the second one, and I really enjoyed the third one. And if I had to say anything about Tobey Maguire is that if people see him as a definitive Spider-Man, I'm not surprised. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is really good. The music is really memorable. The characters are really memorable. The villains are really memorable and important and impactful. Not one-sided. They're not shallow. They have their goals, but at the same time, they're also human, so we can see the flaws in them. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, or Spider-Man, excuse me. All the villains, all the characters, all the scenes, all that. It's good. It's great. Now, the deducting points. The only reason I would is because of the fact that it's older. So some of the CGI may look bad, but that's not even like all the CGI though. Sandman CGI was great. Doctor Octavius's CGI is great. The Green Goblins is probably the worst CGI though, but that was because it was made in 2002. So I can give some leeway, but not too much. Though the fights were amazing. My favorite fights honestly belong in two. Spider-Man 2 to me had the best fights, but Spider-Man 3 was a close second. The character development and the character growth. Peter went through the most character development, obviously because he's the main character. But man, Spider-Man 3 was the best example of the character development. Spider-Man 2, was him figuring things out, trying to work around the fact that Harry doesn't like him anymore, and him trying to get with MJ and all that, so on and so forth. Just trying to be a better person. Taking into the fact that he just might not want to be Spider-Man anymore. But Spider-Man 1, second most character development. Spider-Man 2, least amount of character development. Spider-Man 3, the most character development. Man, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is great. Now, it's not too much I can say negative about it, but it's not my favorite. What's it called? My favorite trilogy. But Tobey Maguire is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and I can see why. He's definitely near and dear to mine. When Spider-Man 3 came out, I loved that movie when it first came out, and I love it now when I rewatched it like uh 15 years later. 15. But yeah, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, amazing. If he was the only Spider-Man to ever exist, I would not be disappointed. Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Sam Raimi, James Franco, Kristen Dunst, uh, J.K. Simmons, all those actors, Willem Dafoe, all of them. They're all great roles that they fit in. Like the only person I wouldn't say I like too much, or not like dislike, more like just like the other movies do her better, is MJ. MJ definitely to me is done better in Amazing Spider-Man. Well, not Amazing Spider-Man because not really, for a different reason. But MJ in Tom Holland's Spider-Man is way better. I like her a lot more. Not because Kristen Dunst's MJ is bad. Well, like just in my personal opinion, I like Zendaya's rendition of her way better. But at the end of the day, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, greatness. That's all I can really say. Nothing short of greatness. Next though is the Amazing Spider-Man. And this is only a duology. People have been clamoring for a third movie to finish off the trilogy, and I'm one of those people. I can definitely say that Andrew Garfield deserves a third movie to finish off his whole series. Because however you feel about however you feel about the movies that he's in, whether you like the first one, whether you like the second one, whether you love both of them or whether you hate them, Andrew Garfield's a great Spider-Man. Honestly, like I could say that Andrew Garfield is a better Spider-Man than Tobey Maguire. Whether you believe it or not, in my personal opinion, I enjoyed uh, Andrew Garfield's work as Spider-Man more than Tobey Maguire in most cases. In most cases, one of the cases I can say that Andrew Garfield wasn't better was during the train scene in Spider-Man 2. Like that whole area and the ending of Spider-Man 2 and then Spider-Man 3, because Tobey Maguire really like filled in the role for Peter. He filled it in super well when it came to like the Venom stuff and all that. But like Andrew Garfield in most cases though, like as a normal Peter and as a normal Spider-Man, he was better. To me he was definitely better. But he wasn't the best Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield was a better Peter, but he wasn't the better Spider-Man in terms of like who's coming next. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield both have that thing of like, all right, sometimes, uh, easy. Sometimes the quips from Spider-Man fall short because of Tobey Maguire being, it, he's filming this in 2002. Like the humor back then was completely different, and even then it was still funny. But Tobey Maguire himself wasn't the one that made the movie funny. Like when he was Spider-Man, he was giving quips, but not as many as like you would usually expect from Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield was giving more quips, but even then it was mostly just Peter on screen for a good majority of the movie. His best clips were definitely in the first Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man. But let's talk about that. The first Amazing Spider-Man movie. The first Amazing Spider-Man is amazing. Like I know I just said amazing in Spider-Man like 6 different times, but it really is just that good. I love this movie. It was great. And I honestly don't really have much to say negative about it except for the fact that Peter's parents I don't think should have been in the story. They do explain some stuff later on in the second movie for them, which I like, but I don't like Peter's parents' inclusion in this movie. And in the second one, I think I honestly got their whack in that the movie would have been better without him. But I won't lie that their contributions to the story are important, so it's like you would feel something missing if they were just removed. But they could have been replaced with something else. Like maybe more Kirk Connors, maybe more Uncle Ben, maybe more Aunt May, so on and so forth. But regardless, I'm not a movie maker, so I wouldn't know. Or a filmmaker, excuse me, and a director. But besides that, anything else negative about that movie that I remember? The lizard CGI was a little weird. I definitely remember feeling a little awkward about seeing that CGI for the lizard or Kirk Connors, because it was definitely like, ah, aha, okay, this is a little strange looking. Ah, excuse me. But besides that, honestly, nothing really else like stuck out to me too much. Maybe the high school stuff. I feel like the high school stuff was a little boring to me, but not because of the fact that Peter was a lot more vindictive, which I'll get to that in a second. But the characters were great, honestly. The characters were great. Not as good as the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but the characters were good. Good to borderline great. And the great characters were great. Like, oh my gosh. Let me start with the normal characters. Aunt May did her job, Uncle Ben did his job, but he was definitely a lot more like a realistic depiction of Uncle Ben. Like Uncle Ben in Tobey Maguire's films with Sam Raimi, he was definitely a good, kind-hearted person. But that's it. He was a good, kind-hearted person who was there to be used as Peter's stepping stone to becoming Spider-Man. Uncle Ben here has the same morals, but he's not an altruistic person at the same time. His morals may be altruistic, but he himself is just a normal New York guy. He doesn't care about. He only cares about his family. Is what I'm trying to say. Like he can get angry. He can get uh, aggressive with Peter. Like he's definitely a grandpa, like uncle, father type figure. If you know your father, you'll know that like sometimes it can just be aggressive sometimes, or like on that type of level, but not in a negative way. More like it's just a thing that happens. Sometimes you can't control your emotions, and I liked it. I liked that depiction of Uncle Ben more than the one in uh, Sam Raimi's version because it was a lot more relatable instead of just being a completely good person. He didn't seem to have any flaws in him. That's not to say that the Uncle Ben in the the Tobey Maguire movies wasn't good. He was pretty funny. But yeah, next after that, Kirk Connors is really good. I enjoyed Kirk Connors. His motives were meh, but him like the idea of turning everybody into lizards sounds corny until you realize it's a gas. Like it's a gas spreading out throughout the city, and it could have been catastrophic. Like the Avengers don't exist in this universe, so there's no way to like have Tony Stark come up with the serum. It has to be Peter. It has to be Peter to come up with the serum, and if he gets turned into a lizard, it's over. And you can already see in the movie when they start turning into lizards, like it's scary. It's honestly scary. So his goal, I guess, was the best part about him. Kirk Connors himself as a doctor in Oscorp was interesting. He was definitely cool. Seeing him talk to Peter, basically Kirk Connors being his version of Octavius, was cool. It was really cool. But after that, you have Gwen Stacy's family. They were interesting. Gwen Stacy's father, especially. Gwen Stacy's father was so interesting. It was insane. Like I have so much to talk about with him, but I'll save that later. Gwen Stacy's dad was the best part about Gwen Stacy's family, and I'll say that you know he was a highlight for the first movie. The high school kids don't matter. Flash Thompson's the same Flash Thompson as usual, a bully who Peter humiliates later on. But after that you have who else? Who else is important? Uh, Meh, no, nobody else. There's only really in the second movie where it comes more important. But then you have Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. Gwen Stacy, amazing. Emma Stone did such a good job being a girlfriend for Peter Parker. I am a Gwen Stacy supporter all the way. Oh my goodness, Gwen Stacy is amazing. It's hard competition between her and Zendaya, but I'm a Gwen Stacy guy for sure. I am a Gwen Stacy fanatic. That's it. Nah, but yeah, Gwen Stacy is great, and Peter is also great. Peter Parker is great. Spider-Man himself is okay. Peter Parker in this movie is amazing because they go deeper into him as a person. It's not if Peter obviously goes through pitfalls and hardships in the first like three Sam Raimi movies, but here you can definitely see more of the fact that Peter causes this himself because of the way that he is. If anybody were to get powers like that, like spider powers, super strength, be able to make web shooters, be as smart as Peter, and your uncle just died in front of you, you would be vindictive for the most part. Most people would be vindictive, I say. Like just wanting vengeance for your uncle who you love so much and you never got a chance to say goodbye to. Like you would definitely have resentment towards the people that did it, and you would go find them because you have the power to. But in turn, that turns you into a vigilante, and if you start wondering why people look at you as a bad guy, you shouldn't have any reservations about it. You are a bad guy, even though your intentions are good. And so it's seeing Peter grapple with that, and also trying to become his own, what's it called, his own person, his own superhero, and just be better, And a good scene to show that is definitely the Birch scene after him or Peter and Gwen Stacy's father have a conversation at the dinner table about Spider-Man, whether he's a vigilante or if he's altruistic. And seeing that bridge scene where Peter chooses to save the child instead of going after Kurt Connors was really sick. Like, it made me cry for sure. And I'll talk about that in a second, which movie made me cry the most. But, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is a good movie. It's a really good movie. And the best part about that movie was Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker's relationship. It was so cute to watch. I loved it so much. Their relationship was such a highlight. Like, I don't think any relationship between Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield could like ever match up. Well, no, Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland. There you go. Andrew Garfield's relationship with Gwen Stacy is amazing. It's too good. But I'll talk about that later. Now it's time to go into the second movie. Second movie was alright. It was okay. I already said my gripes with it before. I don't like it too much. Harry should have had more screen time. Electro was the best part of the movie, besides like Peter himself. Gwen Stacy and Peter's relationship wasn't as good, but obviously it's not a perfect relationship, so it makes sense for there to be hardships. Gwen Stacy's uh thing that happens with her. Well, never mind. You're watching this because you watched Spider-Man already. Gwen Stacy's death was really sad, but I didn't cry as much as some other deaths in the movies. But Gwen Stacy's impact definitely could be felt. Definitely could be felt. Peter at the end of the movie was a really good sight to see, with the kid going in front of Rhino and just standing in front of him with the mask on. It made me cry. I can admit that it made me cry. But this movie could have had more. Okay, the gripe that I mainly have with this movie is that Harry should have been in the first movie. Harry should have been in the first movie for me to fully understand, like, oh yeah, these guys are friends. Because obviously I know Harry and Peter are friends. I saw Sam Raimi's trilogy. But in this is a duology. This is different. This is not the same Harry. This is a completely different Harry. So why should I be attached to him? I don't know who he is. I don't know anything about him except for what was introduced to me in the second movie. I feel like he definitely should have had a lot more screen time in the first movie. Obviously, maybe he wasn't planned for in his first movie, so it makes sense why. But at the same time, I don't feel like he should have been a villain then in this movie if he was gonna be introduced in this movie. Obviously, you can make it work, but just it feels undercooked. It doesn't feel like he should have been a villain yet, even though he was. And the CGI for this movie, I didn't like for certain parts. Harry's transformation into the Green Goblin, I hated it. I did not like it at all. The effects on it made me almost have like epileptic seizures. It was so bad. Like obviously like it wasn't to that degree, but it was really hard to watch the scene. I couldn't look at the screen. It was too honestly, it really was epileptic. Like it was too much. It was literally just too much. And then again, you go into the fact that Peter's parents are involved in this movie. Granted, Peter's parents and their involvement with this movie, I don't think was as bad as the first movie. But the intro being the first 8 minutes of them just flying on a plane, I didn't like it at all. I didn't like that intro whatsoever. But Peter is in Peter or Ben, excuse me, not Ben. What's this dude's name? Richard Parker. There you go. Richard Parker in the later half of the movie was good. I enjoyed him there, but the other halves didn't like him at all, or him and the other person, his wife. There you go. But again, Peter was good in this movie. Gwen was good in this movie. Aunt May was good in this movie. Harry was okay. Electro was good in this movie once he became Electro. Besides that, Max himself was okay. He was weird, which was the point, I guess. But Jamie Foxx is a good actor, but this was not his best role in the Spider-Man thing. It definitely was in No Way Home. Jamie Foxx in No Way Home was way better. But what's it called? Yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think honestly, I can say definitively is the worst movie out of all 8 movies. I didn't like it as much, which it hurts for me to say, but I didn't like it as much. Honestly, I really didn't. But regardless, the villains, Kirk Connors and Electro were pretty good. And I forgot to mention in the other part of the video, Willem Dafoe was great. Green Goblin was great. Octavius was great, and Sandman was good. Venom was good. I liked all the villains. Oh, and Harry. Harry was good. I liked all the villains in the Sam Raimi trilogy, so I can give him that for sure. But next, and finally, become the Tom Holland Spider-Man. Tom Holland Spider-Man. The score wasn't memorable, but that's because it's not the Avengers theme song that played all the time, so I don't really remember it too much. But regardless, doesn't matter. I'm not a musician. I'm not a music analyst. I'm not Anthony Fantano, the internet's busiest music nerd. So I can't really speak to it too much. But regardless, the music, ah, and what's the word for it? It's not invasive, I guess, but it's enjoyable to a certain extent. But who else? Who else? Who else? CGI was great. The CGI was really good. The best in all three of the different Spider-Man. Obviously, because it's the most recent, with the first installment being in 2016 with Civil War. So I can't be too surprised by that, but I do have to give it to that movie. You have the fights. The fights were the best in the entire what's it called? The entire three or eight movies. Tom Holland Spider-Man had the best action, had the best fights, the best choreography or choreography. There you go. Excuse me. He had the best. Tom Holland Spider-Man had the best production, and it makes sense because it's Marvel. Like Marvel always has crazy production. But then you go to the characters. The characters were meh. They Some of them were good, some of them were not so good. Peter was the best one out of all of them. Peter had the most character development. Honestly, Peter's development in these three movies is better to me than in Tobey Maguire's development. Granted, it's really hard to top Spider-Man 3 Tobey Maguire because of how much he developed as a person at the end of it. But Peter overall, it was all a journey of self-discovery. Who you want to be as a superhero? Do you want to be an Iron Man shadow the entire time? How are you gonna make sure that you help people without letting your ego get in the way so you don't become a vigilante? How do you make the right calls? How do you become a better person? How do you understand that people are counting on you now? Do you think you're ready for the responsibility? Do you think you have the power to deal with it? Do you think you have the power to let power go, like Kanye said? It's really all just so many questions in Peter's mind swirling around. What do you do when when Tony Stark is still here? What do you do when he passed away? What do you do when this happened because of your fault? Because it's your fault and you didn't think things through. How do you deal with responsibility? And honestly, I love that. I love Peter's development and growth as a character. I also love Peter being just a cringy high school kid. You can really feel the 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 cringe in like all three movies. I was always just like, oof, Peter, that's not good, but not in the sense of like, oh, this is terrible. Why would the movie do this? It's more like, oh, yo, Peter, you need to chill. I was right there next to him, so I can't even deduct points off of that. Peter was great, and then the rest of the characters, MJ was good, Ned was good, Aunt May was good, Happy was good, Tony was great. Uh, Fury was great or good, I mean, and Doctor Strange was good. Doctor Strange was good, borderline great. To me, he feels like Tony Stark for sure, but in his own way, with magic and all that. But characters were good. They weren't like Tobey Maguire, but they were definitely good. The characters that got the attention definitely got the attention, and it felt great. Definitely felt great. The high school part didn't get as much attention, which I feel like is good. It did get attention in the first movie, and it did get attention. Well, actually, no, the high school did get a lot of attention. The whole second film was based off of the high school. The whole first and second film. The third film's the one that doesn't give much attention to the high school, but the high school itself isn't intrusive. I liked it. I liked it a lot. But villains themselves, Vulture was great. The Vulture honestly might have been my favorite villain from like Tom Holland's original villains. Then you have Mysterio, who was definitely second because the Vulture's hard to one up, but he wasn't bad at all. Mysterio was a good villain for what he was doing in his movie. I feel like he was great. Mysterio was not weak. in the sense of his movie. Then you have No Way Home, which all villains there. There, Green Goblin's gonna be my favorite regardless. So if I had to say anything, Green Goblin would be my favorite from Tom Holland's movies as well, and then Vulture, and then Mysterio. But regardless, that's not the point. Uh, what's it called? If I had to give these a ranking, I would definitely go No Way Home, Homecoming, and Far From Home. Far From Home was my least favorite, like I said before a bunch of times. The first half was not my favorite at all. The second half was great. It was amazing. But it wasn't enough to redeem the first half for me. I thought the first half was really boring. The second or the first movie, I guess, Vulture's movie was great. I loved it, every sense of it, every bit of it. It was such a good introduction to Spider-Man into the MCU, like with his own separate movie, instead of it just being Civil War. The Dominican lady, the small community that Peter builds up in New York. It really is from humble beginnings. Seeing Tony there helping him out a little bit, you can see the small details, right? With Tony Stark, how Peter thinks that he's ignoring him. Peter thinks that Tony's ignoring everything that he's doing, but in reality, Peter's noticed everything that, or excuse me, Tony's noticed everything that Peter's done. With the Dominican lady in the churro, or the all the people that you helped. He notices the Vulture as well. He notices Peter, like, being a novice, so we can't really deal with this yet. And the fairy scene is a great example of that. Like, Tony being kind of like that father figure for him for the first movie was awesome. I loved it. People call it Iron Boy Jr., but I don't care. I really just don't care because I love. Oh, I'm biased, of course, but I think even if I wasn't biased, I love the inclusion of them. I thought he was great. But then you have No Way Home, and No Way Home is a great movie because of the fact that every other movie has built up to this movie, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The three Tobey Maguire movies, two Andrew Garfield movies, and the other two Tom Holland movies all built up to this one cataclysmic, important movie for the culture, for Marvel, for fans of Spider-Man, for fans of Tom Holland, and for people in general. This movie is the best Spider-Man movie of all time. In my eyes, it is greatness. 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 completely. But yeah, I don't have anything bad to say about that movie. So now it's time to talk about the fight scenes. The best the best movie had, or well, Tom Holland had the best fight scenes, but that doesn't mean that I should slouch on the other ones. Andrew Garfield had Kurt Connors fights, which were awesome. I loved the Kurt Connors fights, especially the final fight for the first movie. It was really good, really good. And the fight in the sewer as well was also dope. I enjoyed Kurt Connors so much in that movie. But then you have Electro as well. Electro's fight in the beginning in Times Square was awesome. I loved Electro's fight. All the nostalgia just came pouring out of me when I was watching it. It was sick. It was so sick. And that's basically it for that. Tobey Maguire had great fights, like the final fight in the first movie with or excuse me, and Tobey Maguire and Willem Dafoe. Besides that, most of the other ones were like they were alright. They were definitely alright. Then you have the second movie, which had arguably the best fights, with all the fights against Octavius being amazing. The bank. Then you have the train, and finally you have the one in his own apartment. All three of those fights were awesome. I can't stress to you enough how good the train fight is, though. Like, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you guys listening right now, the train scene is one of the best things I've ever seen in media, and it's only rivaled by a scene in No Way Home. Only rivaled by that. But yeah, Spider-Man 3, you have Peter versus Harry, which is a good fight. You have Sandman versus Peter in the sewers, which is a cool fight. You have Peter and Harry versus Sandman and Venom, which was also a really good fight. The best one in the movie. I'll definitely say that that final fight for the third movie was top three in terms of like the Tobey Maguire fights. But then you have Tom Holland's fights, and Tom Holland has fights, bro. Tom Holland really has some fights. You have the fight at the airport in Civil War. You have the first movie where he fights Vulture for the first time in the park. You have the fight at the end of the movie where he fights Vulture a second time, and what's that place called? When Peter goes to find Vulture after leaving the homecoming dance, and he fights him there as well. Like that and the final fight are connected, so I guess they're just one thing. But that fight was really good. Then you have the second movie with the water monster in the first half of the movie. You have Knocked Monkey in the middle of the movie. You have Peter versus Mysterio Part 1, where Peter's just getting toyed with completely. You have the final fight where Peter goes crazy. He's actually cracked. And then you have the third movie where you have Peter versus Octavius. You have Peter versus Doctor Strange. You have Peter versus Green Goblin and Lizard in the apartment in the condo. You have the final fight where all three Spider-Men fight all of their roles gallery. You have Peter Tom Holland versus Willem Dafoe Part 2. Man, it was crazy. Like, No Way Home had the best fights for sure in all three of the movies that he had. But now it's time to tally it up. What would I rate the movies like in the tier list? Let's start from the bottom up. The worst movie is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I already gave my opinions on it. It wasn't great. It's a 6. Then you go to Far From Home. I think definitely Far From Home is where like the movies start getting good. Because Amazing Spider-Man was okay. It was mediocre. Far From Home is good, but it's not great. It's definitely the weakest out of all three Tom Holland movies. But Far From Home... Actually, you know what? Scratch that. Spider-Man 1. Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 1 is above The Amazing Spider-Man 2. It was old, it's the first movie, I have to give it some slack, but it's not better than the other movies that come out. So, I have to put it here. But Willem Dafoe was great. Willem Dafoe was amazing. He is one of the reasons why he's above The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Then you have Far From Home, which again, Mysterio is great, Peter is great, MJ is great, Ned is great, Nick Fury is great. All of them are great, but the first half of the movie just ruined it so much for me. So it's bottom 3. Then next you go to... Let's go The Amazing Spider-Man 1. We'll put it right there. The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is a good movie. There's no disputing that. The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is a good movie. But it has its flaws, And I can't overlook that. So I have to put it bottom 4. And this is the middle point where it's like, alright, this is where the movies I really praise them. And I'm gonna say Homecoming goes here. Homecoming is definitely top 4 movie for me. I can say that with certainty. I would put it above Spider-Man 2, but Spider-Man 2 is just, oh man. Spider-Man 2 is really good. Actually, you know what? On second thought, never mind. Spider-Man 2 is top 4. Homecoming is top 3. Man. Spider-Man 2 is a great movie. Spider-Man 2 is one of the best movies. But, man. Homecoming is just better. Like, to me, Homecoming is just better. Man, like, I don't even know how else to describe it. Homecoming is just good. It's great, even. So, on the number 5th spot, or the 5th spot, it's Spider-Man 2. 6, it's Homecoming. 7th is Spider-Man 3. The fact that I said Spider-Man 3, I praised it in the title, already goes to show, like, this movie was gonna be up there. And it is. This movie's great. I don't have any gripes with it, for the most part, that I can remember. This movie is top 2, for sure. And then, number 1, no surprise, No Way Home. No Way Home is the amalgamation of every Spider-Man movie that I just talked about, plus more, plus Tom Holland, plus great villains, plus great Doctor Strange, plus MJ and Ned, plus awesome fights, scenes, emotional moments. Like, it's just too good. No Way Home is just too good. And now it's time to talk about which movie trilogy made me cry the most. It was Tom Holland's movies for sure. Tom Holland's number one in terms of how much I cried. Tobey Maguire's number two in terms of how much I cried, and Andrew Garfield's number three. But I can say with certainty that all three movies I did cry in. So that's a that's something if you care about that. But yeah, that's all of them. I Now it's time to talk about which one's my favorite Spider-Man. Tom Holland. Tom Holland's my favorite Spider-Man. And if I had to rate it, it would be Andrew Garfield bottom three. Well, actually, no. Tobey Maguire bottom three, Andrew Garfield number two, and then Tom Holland number one. And it's hard to say that, right? Because all three of them are good. All three of them are great, actually. Tobey Maguire is the definitive Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield is a great Spider-Man, and Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man so far. So it's hard to really talk talk about all three of them and choose which one's your favorite. Because it's either gonna be bias, nostalgia, or you're it's close. It's definitely close. But for me, Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man in my opinion. I enjoyed his movie so much. I enjoyed Peter, the way he played him. I enjoyed his Spider-Man because his clips were great. Tom Holland's Spider-Man is the best one in terms of the trilogy, in terms of Spider-Man himself, in terms of the characters. Some of them other movies do better things, but Tom Holland's Spider-Man is just great. So I have to give the gold medal to him. And I think that's everything, honestly. I think that's everything. Yeah, that's all the Spider-Man movies that I wanted to watch. All eight of them, all nine technically. Man, it feels weird. It feels weird that I'm not gonna be doing this anymore. Obviously, I'm not gonna stop watching Marvel movies, but man, it feels super weird. Like, I finally finished it. It's probably gonna feel even better when I finish One Piece. But man, that was great. I love going through all those movies. I enjoyed that so much, and I hope you guys do as well. Like, that was so much. All movie, any Andrew Garfield one, any Tobey Maguire one. I strongly recommend doing it. All three of those movies, or all nine of those movies, are great. Some of them are mediocre. Some of them are literally like peak cinema for me. So at the end of the day, it's up to you on which one you want to watch, which one's your favorite, and which one you don't like as much. Because it's all opinion, right? This is my opinion. If you think I'm geeking out of my mind, good, because that shows that you have a different opinion from me, and that's great. It shows that we're all different individual thinkers, and we can all have a discussion on what we like while being civilized about it. So, if you have anything different that you want to say, like who your favorite Spider-Man is, who your least favorite Spider-Man is, how you feel about these movies, let me know in the comments. I'll always be interested to hear. But as always, though, this is gonna be it from me for now. Spider-Man, the 9 movies I watched, it's over. It's in the history books. I can finally close this chapter of this channel and move on to something else. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you all for watching as always, and I'll see you all next time for when I record something else on me talking about whatever I talk about for X amount of minutes. Thank you all as always from the bottom of my heart. Y'all stay safe, and I'll check y'all out. Peace.